What do you guys think about Revelation? Is it not a very different book from all the other books you have read so far?
Oh yeah.
So you have to already know, by just observing that, you already need to know that maybe you need to read it also in a different way. Maybe there are different tools that need to be used to understand what you're reading. Just like when you read something poetic, it's different from when you read something that's a historical narrative. Historical narrative you read differently than you read an epistle. Even a gospel is different from epistles and historical narratives because they are very selective in what they choose and what they communicate. And so is it with Revelation. It's a whole new genre of literature called apocalyptic literature. And so we're going to talk about that, yeah? All right, good. So, it's not, it does come to us in a form or as a, oh wait a minute, let me see, why is it not showing on the screen? Duplicates, okay. Good. So, the form is an epistle because John is writing to the 7 churches, yeah, that are in Asia, which is what today is called Turkey. I've been to most of those cities last year when in Turkey. The content is also familiar in that it is prophecy, when we have read prophecy before. So we know what epistles are, we know what prophecy is, but now we are talking about the type of literature, and that is still very new to us. We did talk a little bit perhaps about it when we were reading books like Daniel, Ezekiel, and Zechariah, because those books have elements of what we call this new genre, apocalyptic literature, new to us. But for the most part, we have not seen yet this genre in our Bible. All right? So it opens like a letter. John to the 7 churches in chapter 1, verse 11. All right? Also chapter 1, verse 4, John to the 7 churches that are in Asia. All right? It says, the grace of the Lord Jesus be with you all in chapter 22, verse 21. So it also closes like a letter. All right? But then everything in between is very foreign, very different. Yeah? So it's not a typical letter. Yeah? A typical letter may contain some prophecies, but this book, this whole letter, identifies itself as a prophecy. Chapter 1, verse 3, chapter 2, verse 7, and even more verses in chapter 2. It says this letter, this entire letter basically is a prophecy. Yeah? So, what kind of letter, what kind of prophecy, what is this book all about? All right? Now, Revelation is an exhortation to the believers. Remember, it's also a letter, so it is a pastoral letter written to the 7 churches, and it is an exhortation to them. An exhortation to say that fulfilled prophecy is fulfilled prophecy is a strengthening encouragement to the faith, but yet to be fulfilled prophecy is always a summons to obedience. That is basically what prophecy is. That is also what a pastor would do. Okay? To strengthen the believer's faith, but also call them to obedience. Yeah? So it is pastoral, it's also evangelical, this letter. Because, for example, in chapter 22, verse 17, it says, the Spirit and the bride say, come. They're inviting the audience to come and join them. Yeah, so it is both pastoral and evangelical. Yeah? But it's also an apocalypse. All right? It's an apocalypse. What does apocalypse mean? It's in Revelation. All right? It is, if you look at the verb of the Greek word, it is to reveal, to disclose, to uncover. We get the English word revelation from the Latin and that is revelatus. Okay, revelatus is of course the word for the Latin of the Greek apocalypse, and then we get revelation from the Latin word apocalypse, which is revelatus in English, revelation. All right. Now, as we just said before class started already a little bit, and we were wondering, what is this all about? And it is strange to us. In fact, it is the book that bears the name Revelation is maybe the most unrevealed book in the Bible. Now, it's not supposed to be that way. It certainly was not the case among the original audience, the very first people that were reading this. To them, it was an unveiling, and it was very clear for them. Why is it that it has become so foreign to us? Because we do not, we are no longer familiar with the type of literature that we are reading, which is apocalyptic literature. And that is why many times, in fact, I've heard books and I've heard teachers on Revelation more than anything else, all right, over the years. I mean, when you have a speaker coming and you want to invite the whole body of Christ to come to the meeting, if the teacher is going to teach about Leviticus, nobody will show up. But if the pastor decides, why don't we have the speaker teach on Revelation, everybody shows up. All right? So over the years, I have heard a number of speakers teach on Revelation. But what I'm sharing with you today, I've never heard before. Not prior to when I became a student of the Bible myself. All right? And the reason, basically, Revelation doesn't have to be so strange and foreign to us. And the message actually is very simple. I remember one time in my own church back in Holland saying something like that, and said, Revelation is really not that difficult. Of course it is, but I was just fooling everybody, making them try to make a point come across. And it's really, really easy. I can actually describe the main message of all of Revelation in 2 words. And I said, the 2 words are, Jesus wins. That's it. That is the main idea of the whole book of Revelation. Now afterward, one of the elders of the church came to me and said, yo, I remember one time a new believer that has just joined the church. He had never read the Bible before, read Revelation for the first time, and was very surprised that all the believers, all the Christians in the church said this is a difficult book. And here this man that has never read the Bible before reads Revelation for the first time and said, why do they say it's so difficult? Don't they see? God wins. And so even a new person that has just come into the text for the first time can get the message. But sometimes we make it so complicated, we want to talk so much about the details that we are losing sight of the big picture. And that of course is very sad, because then we study the details, and we never, of all the speakers I've heard before, nobody said that to me. The main message in Revelation is Jesus wins. All right? And sometimes we just need to go back and read it for ourselves, and maybe forget everything we have learned from others, and just let the text speak to us, and maybe we come again to that particular conclusion. All right? Now, when I read Revelation, all right, I see a book, I see something like a story, and there is a constant change of scenes, like moving pictures. It is like a slideshow. A PowerPoint presentation. Okay, there is a lot of action. Everything is constantly astir, and there are many symbols used. Now that's what we're going to come back to too, because we are often not understanding that we are dealing with a book that is filled with symbolism. I wanted to show you another book, but I just realized last night that one of my staff took it with her. Jo Farring, who has been with us also, she's teaching somewhere else, and she brought the book with her. I can give you a whole book, and all that does is list all the symbols in Revelation. I mean, I haven't counted it up, but I'm sure it's more than 1,000. So it's like everything you read is actually symbolism. But we forget that, and we want to often impose today's Greek mind, Greek thinking, Western thinking, and we just impose our interpretation on a text, and it was never intended that way. We need to go back to what things meant 2,000 years ago. But let's first describe this thing that we're reading about. We see lots of pictures. We also have lots of sounds. Okay? We have lots of sounds and voices. All right? And we have responses to things that we are reading, seeing, that John is seeing. So we have responses to it. We sometimes have choirs. There is a chorus that's being sung. There are songs in Revelation. There are about 7 or 8 songs that are being sung by the angels. So we have choruses, we have choirs, and so forth. One picture makes place for another, and then another, and then another. And so in order for us, let's watch these constantly changing scenes. So what we experience, this is what John is experiencing, and he wants to experience with him. It says in chapter 1 verse 10, John was in the Spirit and he heard a loud voice like a trumpet. All right? So he sees, and then he sees the Son of Man. Okay, it's not right there on the text, but right following that. So he hears a loud voice like a trumpet, and then it says he sees the Son of Man walking among 7 golden lampstands. And then the Son of Man, which by the way comes out of Daniel chapter 7 verse 13 and 14, the Son of Man is described wearing a long robe with a gold sash, a belt around his breast. His hair is white as snow. His eyes are blazing like fire. His feet was like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace. His right hand held 7 stars. His mouth issued a double-edged sword. All right? So if you want to be a literalist, you have already a lot of problems. And you're going to have a lot of problems throughout the book to understand. For example, later Jesus described as a lamb with 7 eyes. Well, that's not a pretty lamb. But maybe we are not supposed to take it literally. And when we do not take things literally, then we begin to ask, what does the symbolism mean? Why 7? Why eyes? And when then we begin to do that, maybe we are actually doing what was intended by the author. Not to literally, not to take everything literally, but to find out what the meaning is behind it. Okay? Then suddenly the scene changes in chapter 4. Heaven's doors is open, and it says, John is in the Spirit and he looked. Chapter 4 verse 1. What he sees. John sees, so remember, John sometimes hears sound, sometimes he sees things. John sees a throne and a halo, a circle of light all around that throne. On the throne was somebody impossible to describe. He is having a hard time to describing, very much like Ezekiel has very hard time to describe God when he sees visions of God in chapter 1 of Ezekiel. Okay? From the throne is flashes of light, peals of thunder. Above the throne was a rainbow. Around the throne were the 24 elders and 4 living creatures. The 4 living creatures had eyes everywhere. Can you imagine that? Okay, they had 6 wings. John first heard them saying, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord. And then the 24 elders who are sitting on their thrones, John sees them falling down and worshiping God. John sees the one who is on the throne holding a scroll with 7 seals. All right? And then appears somebody upon the throne. He is introduced as the Lion, the Triune of Judah. Okay? And he takes the scroll because he is the one, because he says, the angel would say, who is worthy to open up the scroll? And nobody in heaven and earth is worthy to open up the scroll. And then suddenly John sees the Lamb standing as if it was slain, worthy to open up, able to open up the scroll. All right, and so then we go on. John's in chapter 6. So we again see new slides coming past, new pictures. Everything is astir. Lightning, new pictures, new sounds. John sees in chapter 6, verse 1. John sees 4 horses, white, red, black, and pale. That is right in context of the opening of the seals. The breaking of the seals on the scroll. He sees first 4 horses, white, red, black, and pale in color. All right? And the first rider brings war between nation and nation. The second one caused war within the nation, which means civil war. The third brings economic disruption to the planet. The fourth one, the last rider, he killed a lot of people with his sword and brought famine and sickness. And also brought wild animals, it says. So a lot of problems. John sees then afterwards, when the 5th seal, I think it is, that is opened up, John sees souls of the slaughtered individuals crying out for justice. Yeah? All right, and then justice will come, but before justice will come, it says John hears that the 4 angels are told to hold back the 4 wings in chapter 7, verse 3. So there is a constant changing of scenes and action. All right, there is a lot of noise. John sees 144,000 that are marked with a seal. All right, so many times when we listen to speakers on Revelation, we always talk about the mark of the beast. What about the mark of the Holy Spirit or the mark of God? Actually, the mark of God is first mentioned in Revelation. Okay, the righteous are marked also with a seal on their foreheads. Now again, are we literally going to be branded with a number on our foreheads? Well, according to some speakers, yes, when you have the mark of the beast. But then are we, the righteous, then also literally going to be branded a number on our forehead just because? Is that what the original audience would get away with? Is that what John wanted? All right. So, Alicia, can you give me a glass of water? Because from the church, I've been having throat problems already for quite a while. So you kind of get it, right? It's scenes that are changing constantly. Everything is a stir, yeah? So you can, I only do a little bit. You can go through the whole Bible like that, what I just did. So, John is on Patmos, and it's like not the revelation, plural, of Jesus Christ, it says. No, it's the revelation, singular, of Jesus Christ. It's like one big presentation that all comes in one day, probably, like in one moment. And he has a hard time writing it down. In fact, that is why the original Greek is very poor. Okay, he didn't have a scribe. He was banished in Patmos. He had to just write it down to the best of his ability. Everything he sees he writes down really quickly. All right? And so we can see that from the way the text is set up. All right? Now, so as I said at the beginning of class, we are dealing with a new genre of literature. We call it apocalyptic literature. Okay? And it was well known in those days, not to us. Today, maybe we read a detective. And when we read a detective story, Roman, then what happens? Typically what happens is there is a crime committed. Then the whole body of the text is about the detective trying to find out who is the guilty person. And during the time, we are also, as when we are reading, we constantly are wondering, is it this guy or is it that woman? Who is the one who committed the crime? And then usually we are taken by surprise at the end of the story that, oh, this is the guy that did it. And then the main idea often in the book is that justice will always be victorious, will win, you know, like, so the good guys win, all right? So that is a typical detective Roman. And we would be familiar with it today because we get a lot of those. In those days, Revelation is like one of many apocalyptic literatures that came out. It was a very popular style of writing, both early on among the Jews, still when we were in the Old Testament, about 200 BC, up to about 200 AD among the Christians, because of course many of the Christians were also Jews, they are Jewish Christians, and picked up on that. All right? And so there is a lot of apocalyptic literature that we have found. Sometimes we only found the name, sometimes we only found, it's not like we have found the entire books always, but we know many titles. We know there was much out there at that time. Yeah? And so, comparing all those books with each other helps us learn how we actually should read the text. What are some of the common things among these books? Now, the word, when I say apocalyptic literature, of course in those days it wasn't called yet apocalyptic literature. In fact, as I said earlier, apocalypse means revealing, unveiling, and because Revelation begins with the revelation, the apocalypse of Jesus Christ, that is where actually now we call this genre apocalyptic. It actually comes out of the book of Revelation. Yeah. Now Revelation does not agree in every part about, does not fulfill all the. Well, let me just share with you the things that are common and uncommon among the apocalyptic literature, and some of it is also in Revelation. Yeah. So here there is a list of what has been found. Yeah. This is just a few. There are many, many, many more. Yeah? All right. Only Revelation is inspired by the Holy Spirit, therefore, in the Bible. These are non-inspired ones. Okay? But it is a common type of literature during those days. Yeah? Now, so, so comparing Revelation with some of the other apocalyptic literature, some of the characteristics are not the same. All right? And then I talk about the ones that are similar. Number one, okay, the other literature are always pseudonymous. How you say that? Pseudonymous? Okay, not anonymous. Anonymous means that we do not know who the writer is. Pseudo means false. Therefore, there is a fake author used. If we talk about the Revelation, earlier we see, for example, we have the Apocalypse of Peter, all right? The Apocalypse of Ezra, the Book of Enoch, the Apocalypse of Moses, yeah? Now those are, basically what happens is somebody writes in a book, a story, and then uses the name of a famous character, Peter, Moses, Enoch, and puts that in there. So we don't know who the author is, they just used, because maybe it sells better. All right, or it gets read better by more people. The Book of Enoch. Enoch is a character out of Genesis. Everybody among the Jews knows, so they read the Book of Enoch, but they do know, everybody knows it's not written by Enoch because that's too long ago. Yeah? Same with Peter. Somebody writes a book, The Apocalypse of Peter. Peter in the Christian church was a famous character, obviously, for obvious reasons, but he already died. But somebody writes the Apocalypse of Peter. So they use fake names, pseudo names, all right? But Revelation is not like that. Revelation is clearly written by John and by the real John, okay? We don't believe that it was a fake author. If it was a fake author, it wouldn't be in the Bible. Okay, it wouldn't be in the Bible because that is one of the conditions of having something approved for the canon, and that is it got to be an apostle, got to be somebody that, you know, that it's not fake. Yeah? Pseudo-prophetic. A lot of the literature that came out in those days, it's like writing prophecy after, writing history after it already has happened. So you write something, okay, say we have 9/11 happening, right? We had 9/11 happening, and so I prophesy that 9/11 is going to happen. But it already has happened, but in my book I make it as if it hasn't happened yet, so that it is a prophecy, right? And then many years later people reading my book and they think, oh, Yo is a prophet, but that's actually not true. It is pseudo, it is pseudo-prophetic, it's actually fake prophecy, all right? And so much of the apocalyptic literature was fake, but again, not the book of Revelation, all right? We also have other things like esoteric, okay? Esoteric means that it is intended only for a small group of people, all right? An esoteric cult, all right? A particular group that, because it contains hidden secret knowledge, yeah? Only to be understood by a few. And only if you possess the key, then you will be able to unreveal, to understand this. Well, Revelation is not intended that way. Revelation is intended to be understood by everybody. It's not a secret. It is a mystery, but the mystery has been made known to the whole world. It's an evangelical book. It invites people to become believers, as I said earlier. All right, so it's not esoteric. Many times these books are pessimistic, okay? There is no hope for the present. There is only hope for the future, day of the Lord. So many times they speak about the coming of a Messiah, the day of the Lord, and then we will be redeemed, but there is no hope for the present. So generally it is a pessimistic book, but not Revelation. It's often also non-ethical, okay? There is no exhortation in all of those books to overcome evil with doing good. But in Revelation, it's clearly very ethical, okay? We are to overcome. We are constantly being reminded to overcome evil. So these are the things that are not typical, even though these are some of the characteristics that we have found in the other literature. It's not shared with Revelation, because Revelation is optimistic. Yeah, Revelation is ethical. It is true prophecy, and we know the author and so forth. Yeah? But then here are the things, the strong ones, that we see that are being shared among the different prophetic, among the apocalyptic books. Telescopic, meaning it prophesies, it speaks about the future, it's like a telescope, it brings it closer, but sometimes it also prophesies about something that is in the immediate future. So John may see something that's 2,000 years away, but he could also, at other times, he sees something that's only like a couple years away. He may very well have in mind persecution that will happen to the church that is contemporary with him. And at other times he's saying something that may be in a very far future. Just like we saw in Old Testament prophetic literature. Sometimes it talks about immediate, okay, this is what's going to happen in the immediate, but then sometimes it talks about Jesus, which is from the time of the prophets, hundreds and hundreds of years in the future. And so we have both. We call that telescopic. Angelic role, and that is that in the story, yeah, we have angels. Sometimes the author, the person that sees the visions, is interacting, communicating with the angel, and the angel, so maybe the angel is asking a question and said, John, what do you see? And said, I don't know what the heck I'm looking at. And then the angel explains. That interaction happens in the book of Revelation, yeah? So there is an angelic role. It is eschatological, always talking about the end times. Okay, many of the other books are also about the end times. Why did it become such a popular form of literature in those days? It's because the Jews were being persecuted. For hundreds of years they have been oppressed. There have been foreign powers occupying their land. So that was like their form of escape. Being able to go and listen to a story, and in the story we are the good guys that win. right? So it was like to bring, it was like a form of entertainment during very difficult times. All right, so a means of escapism. Just today, sometimes maybe there is a lot of problems in the world, and we go to the cinema, watch a movie, and that helps us to yeah, just to be able to set our mind away, to take our mind off all the problems. All right, I remember, in fact, coming back to 9/11. I think it was during the 9/11 that the Lord of the Rings came out, and a lot of people were in the cinema. It was like a form of escapism, being able just to be in a whole different world, not to have to worry about the problems of the day. Okay, and that makes sense. Well, that is also made sense 2,000 years ago. Of course, then they didn't have a cinema, then they would have these books that just come out. Yeah? So talk about the end times. So as I said, persecution is the historical background of the audience reading. Yeah, persecution. Dualistic. Dualistic is very black and white. Good versus evil. There's a fight going on between good and evil in the book of Revelation. That is why I'm also saying, and the main point of the book is Jesus wins. Yeah, and even a new believer reading Revelation for the first time, perhaps he was very familiar with books like The Lord of the Rings. And therefore, when he read the book of Revelation, he wonders, why is everybody saying this is so different, so strange? It's obvious. Jesus wins. That's the point of the story. All right? But maybe because he was a little bit more into other types of literature than most of us. And therefore, we didn't get it the first time. Non-chronological. Here there's a big issue. Oh, we love to put everything in a nice timeline. All right? Well, good luck if you try to do that Revelation. I also tried to put everything in a timeline when I did not understand apocalyptic literature. It's impossible, okay? It is very cyclical, okay? Going in circles. One time it says, John says, and the mountains have been removed, and then the next scene opens up and the mountains are back. What happened to those mountains? They were already thrown in the ocean, but they are back again. So he is going back over and over again in cycles, just like John did that also in the epistles of John. He was not very linear in thought. He goes in cycles. Well, here we have a presentation. I think it's a drama unfolding with many cycles. And we have symbolism. Lots of symbolism. Now, I'm not sure if I actually done this before, but see if we understand symbolism. Tell me if I already did this trick with you guys before. All right? Hold on a second. Okay, symbolism comes later. Let me see. Let me see what I was going to say about historical background before we go on to symbolism. All right? So, obviously, to understand Revelation, we must make a big, but it's not even an assumption, it's just a principle. And that is all prophecy, and therefore also all the symbolism, must be interpreted in the light of the historical background of the 7 churches that are in Asia. Yeah? How did they understand the book? Yeah? How did they understand the prediction? How did they understand the symbols? Yeah?
Would you say that again?
Okay, so all prophecy that is being written, John is having an audience in mind.
The 7 churches.
The 7 churches. And therefore everything he writes must be and can be understood by the 7 churches. Not in all detail necessarily, and just like before the time of Jesus, people understand this idea of Messiah, but didn't exactly know what the Messiah will come to do, right? But they understand something. There is some hope given to the audience, yeah? It must mean, the symbolism must mean something to the original audience.
But Christ's world, or the Christianity at that point, wasn't limited to the 7 churches. So
of course.
Why was John focusing only on those 7 churches?
Okay, that's what I said in the beginning. It was also an epistle.
Oh.
Remember, an epistle was written to a very specific audience.
Right.
But then the content is prophecy. And the type of literature is apocalyptic.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we also read the letters of Peter and Paul today. So we also get to benefit from it. Remember, as I said in 25 weeks ago, I said, like, all of the Bible, it's written not to us, it's written to a different audience, but it is for us, for our benefit. And we shouldn't forget that Revelation is the same way. So when I if I begin to interpret and say this is Apache helicopters that we have now, and these are the Russian armies and we're going to have war, well, did the original audience going to think that way? Probably not. And it's probably safer to first study the historical background of the 7 churches and begin to interpret and try to place yourself in the shoes of that particular audience. Say, now when Jesus is among the 7 lampstands, what does lampstand mean? Well, actually, John explains, the angel explains it to John. These 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. All right, okay. So don't make lampstand mean anything else but the 7 churches. And that is with everything in the symbolism. Actually, a lot of the symbols is actually explained in the book of Revelation, but there is also a lot not explained. But doesn't mean that, but then we need to ask ourselves, what do the original audience get away with it? What would they think? I have to move on really fast. Okay, so basically all these scriptures show that that the historical background too is one of persecution. These are all internal evidence. These are all references in the book of Revelation indicating that persecution was going on. He's not necessarily addressing persecution in a direct way, but when you read the text, it obviously implied there is something like this. This person is murdered, okay, killed. We know that John is banished. There is also persecution from imperial, all right? That means from the emperor, okay? There were fake apostles, all right, that are causing confusion, okay? We have people thrown in prison. We have people cast before lions. We have people crying out under the altar for justice because their blood was shed. So there is a martyrdom has to be taking place and is expected to continue to take place. Yeah, somebody was beheaded. Yeah, all right. So that is what we know. Internal evidence. Oh, I thought I was going to do. Okay, so I'm doing the symbolism much later in the text. So. Yeah. Then we have, okay, so here we have 4 schools of interpretation. Yeah. Now these are the mainstreams. I have never actually, I have not really met a lot of people that are entirely 100% one stream, right? But these are the 4 main ones. And then sometimes people take a little bit of one and the other. So we have 4 schools of interpretation. And whatever interpretation you hold will dramatically affect everything you see and everything you read. The consequences are huge. And many times, especially in America, when I speak into a Bible school, almost 100% of the people thought, oh, I thought there was only one view. The one view I heard in church, or the one view I heard at a conference. I didn't know there were more than one views. And to their surprise, they found that maybe a majority, and maybe on a different continent, such as Europe, that they view Revelation very different than, say, in America. Very different. All right? So we need to maybe take more of a humble approach here and say, well, we don't know for sure if our approach is right. Same with me. When somebody asks me, yo, which of the 4 views do you teach? Well, I say, well, before I answer that question, that I want you to understand, I'm not trying to convince anybody that I'm trying to say that my view is the only view and the right view. But I said my intention, when I teach on the book of Revelation, my desire is that people receive a new revelation of who Jesus is. Yeah, that's what the point of the book is, the revelation of Jesus Christ. Why would I want to be wrapped up around here and talk about all the different views and all the details and so forth, and talk about all of that, and then in the midst of all that, people lose sight of who Jesus is in the book. And so it's much more important, and I could use any of these approaches if I wanted to, and I can see Jesus in a better light than ever before. All right, so in a way, although of course we can't say all revelations are correct, all approaches are correct, there is only one correct approach, but we do need to take some humility here and say, I may be wrong. But regardless then, as long as I get a revelation of who Jesus is, I think the book can still speak to me. All right, so we have the historicist approach. The historicist says that prophecies are fulfilled throughout history. So everything that I read is like, some of it is fulfilled, some of it is not. Maybe today we are in chapter 17. That means chapter 1 to 16 is already fulfilled, chapter 18 and onward is still to be fulfilled, or something like that. Historicist approach. The prophecies are fulfilled throughout history. The preterist approach, preterist, I think it's from the Latin word, and that means past. That is why we say preterist. The preterist says that the prophecies are fulfilled not long after it was written. If, say, and many preterists would say it was written actually in the 60s, and then we see 70 AD happen. What happens in 70 AD? The temple and Jerusalem is destroyed. So all those predictions we read in Revelation are actually fulfilled. Maybe many of the things said is symbolic, and then the fulfillment of these prophecies happened in 70 AD. Now, some people, like I have a very good friend who actually wrote you guys had him here, Steve Gregg. I don't know if you remember Steve Gregg. A long time ago, he spoke one Sunday morning with us. He wrote the book Four Views of Revelation. Yeah, he is actually a preterist, but he does say that the last few chapters, I think it's chapter 19 to 22 or 18 to 22, is still future. Yeah, so he is a little bit preterist. He is mostly preterist, but he does make a compromise and says some of it is futurist. The futurist approach is that the prophecy, almost all prophecy is fulfilled just prior to Jesus' return. Which means if you're a futurist, then everything you read in Revelation is in your and my future. That is today's popular view among the evangelical church. They think Revelation, okay, what is going to happen in our future? And that is how they read Revelation. Very different from the preterist, isn't it? Because the preterist says everything actually, it has already happened it happened in the past, our past, but from the perspective of the author and the original audience, the seven churches, it's still in their future. Yeah? So that will be the futurist approach. Then we have the spiritual approach. It's the least popular in America, and guess what? That is my approach. And as I think we should apply a spiritual approach. We also sometimes call it idealist approach. We call it figurative, spiritual approach, idealist approach, or symbolic approach, meaning I just see a lot of symbolism in the text. And what we say then about prophecy, if you are an idealist or a symbolist or a spiritual, I don't know if you should say spiritualist, that may mean something else as well, but anyway, prophecies are fulfilled continually and repeatedly. What do I mean with that is, okay, I do believe that the prophecies are fulfilled like a preterist, sometime in the early days, like for example in 70 AD, but it's not, it is because we have the cycles, because we have the number 7, that is very common in the book of Revelation, meaning symbolic, like it's not to be, so it talks about it is also going to be fulfilled again in the future. So we may have, say, a Nero, Emperor Nero, who is like the Antichrist. In fact, 666, when you look at the word Caesar Nero, you can actually come up with the number 666. Yeah, but then the number 6, the Nero is the type, the prototype. And then there are many Neros that will come up throughout history, like the Mao in China, like the Lenin in the Soviet Union. And there are many of these people, those dictators coming up that are going to be doing like killing many people and bringing a lot of persecution and so forth. And so what John is seeing is like a type. And there are many types following that. Is, you know, a Nero is a type, and then there are many like Nero that will come up, and up till the time that, and that will continue till Jesus comes back. Yeah? And it's true. I mean, if you think of it for a moment, you don't think that we are heavily persecuted today. So what the heck is the book of Revelation talking about? We are not persecuted. But if you're in North Korea and you would read the book of Revelation, you know, you think Jesus can come back any moment now. Well, it's written for them too, or to them, not to them, but for them too. And so different times, different seasons, in different locations, these things happen. And so these are like, these symbols that John is seeing are not fulfilled at one time and only then, but it is throughout history happening. Typical throughout history until Jesus comes back. Yeah? Good.
And I think we say and acknowledge history repeats itself.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
We say and acknowledge that history repeats itself.
Right, yeah, yeah. All right, and so then we have 4 schools of interpretation. We have 3 views on the millennium. Okay, Don already talked about 1,000 year. Well, we have, in relationship to when Jesus comes back, there are people that say that are post-millennial. That means Jesus comes back after. Then we have the premillennial, and that is Jesus comes back before the millennium. And then we have the amillennial. Am means not little. Okay, and that's my view again, because I'm an idealist. And that is the 1,000-year reign is a symbol for what? For the church age, beginning with the first coming and finishing up with the second coming, our age. We are living in the church age. We are living between the first and the second coming. Now, I had a hard time understanding, why do I need to take that literally? I can take everything else, I mean, symbolically. I can see this dragon with, and so forth is symbolic, or this beast with the 10 heads and 7 horns, or the other way around is symbolic, okay? Okay, these are impossible for us to see in the real world. It's kind of like the Chronicles of Narnia. It's like mythological, but it's not literal. I can see the symbolism. But then when it comes to numbers, I gotta have to take it literally, right? Well, okay. The number 13, we call that the unlucky number. We describe also symbolism to a number. In China, nobody wants to live on the 4th floor because the number 4 sounds, the number in Chinese also sounds like death. Okay, it's almost the same pronunciation, almost the same word. So nobody wants to live on the floor of representing death. So no, it's an unlucky number in China. In fact, when I talk about 1,000, you know, 1,000 years, meaning like an unspecified long period of time, I can understand that too, because, for example, our university, we call ourselves the University of the Nations. When the Chinese decided to translate that into Chinese, they came up with a very good name. Do you know what the University of the Nations means in Chinese? We call it the 10,000 Nation University. Okay, but there are not 10,000 nations. If you're a literalist, you're asking. But 10,000 means many. Okay, just like 1,000 years can maybe mean a long period of time, unspecified. You understand? So numbers could mean symbolic, so it's unspecified. Just like when we talk about 3.5 years, we like to know when the 3.5 years begin, when the 3.5 years end. But that is if you're a literalist. But if I'm not a literalist, if I'm an idealist, I see 3.5 as an unspecified period of time. Now, coincidentally, it took 3.5 years for the siege of Jerusalem to happen by the Babylonians to destroy Jerusalem. So maybe 3.5, and also Daniel prophesied about 3.5. He calls it time, times, and half a time. Maybe there was a symbolism, and it was literally fulfilled in 586 BC when Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians. And now it becomes a symbolic meaning. 3.5 for the future, for being under siege, for being persecuted for a season, but not necessarily taking a 3.5. And maybe 3.5 does mean intense persecution towards the end of the church age. But I'm not going to have a lack of sleep over it if it's less than 3.5 or more than 3.5. All right? I will have lack of sleep for other reasons because we are being severely persecuted. Anyway, so, all right, so reading the book of Revelation, you have to make a presupposition. Is the book literal or is the book figurative? And that decision will have huge consequences to the book of Revelation. And I can testify to the fact that if literal approach has gotten me nowhere. All right? So I think I would propose maybe we should try the figurative approach. Now, what do we mean with this? Well, when I say the figurative approach, it means that nothing is literal? No, that's not what I'm saying. Okay? That is the approach. When I have a literal approach, and I've talked with teachers about their approach, they will say, well, things are literal except when obviously symbolic. All right? But I take the opposite approach. I take the figurative approach, meaning everything is intended figurative except when obviously literal. There are 7 churches. Well, actually there were more than 7 churches. Okay, there is like the church of Colossae, which is right next to Ephesus. And John doesn't write to Colossae, poor Christians in poor Colossians. All right? Well, that is maybe only because John was intended to use the word 7, the number 7. And there are more than 7, but he wanted just 7, because 7 had a symbolic meaning. It was also intended for the wider audience. All right? And of course, John knows letters are being passed around, so he knows that the letter will also reach the Colossians. Yeah? So I'm saying I use the figurative approach. That means everything I read, I begin assuming it's symbolic until it's obvious, except when it's obviously literal. Very different from the literal approach. But this decision you have to make, because after you make the decision, the way you look at the book is very different. Yeah? All right. Now, so as I said, symbolism, I don't think we have time for this. All right. So, did I do this before, this trick? Huh? No. Okay, what the heck is he saying? The eagle and the lion should join the bear to keep the dragon from chasing the rising sun into the sea. Now, you can understand that. Easy. What is it saying?
There's got to be a union of opposites, people that have the same kind of some of the same kinds of things they want to obtain, the same goals, getting together and chasing the rising sun. And
okay, very good, very good.
Coming to some kind of agreement.
Okay, so now I'm going to give you a key. And when I give you the key, it unlocks the meaning. And the key is this. It talks about nations. Can you now interpret?
Say that again.
Yes.
The key to reveal this hidden mystery, to explain the symbolism, and I give you now the key. The key is that it talks about nations. Can you now interpret?
Yes, there are 4 nations that are trying to keep Japan from chasing the rising sun, which is Japan, into the sea.
Very good. So who is the eagle?
That's got to be us.
Who is the lion?
Someplace in Europe.
United Kingdom.
United Kingdom.
Who is the bear?
That's Russia.
Okay. Okay. The eagle and the lion join. So Russia. America and United Kingdom join Russia to stop
the dragon, and that's got to be China.
China from
chasing Japan.
Japan into the ocean, meaning China is coming after Japan in some kind of a war.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so sometimes we don't see the key, then we don't know what we are reading. And sometimes because 2,000 years have gone by, we don't get it so quickly. Let me give you another example. The bulls have chased the bears from the floor. What the heck is that about?
Stock market?
Huh?
Stock market?
Okay, very good. Could it be football? American football?
It could also be that.
Most of the time, because the young kids in my class, they say, oh, it must be American football. Yeah. But Linda is right, okay? But if I show you the picture, then you immediately understand what I mean.
Yeah.
But for young people, I have to show them the picture, and then they say, aha, I understand. All right? Now this one should be, and this one was easy for the Americans, difficult, or maybe a little bit harder, except of course if you live in America. Okay, and that is the face-off between elephant and donkey continues. Okay, I have a picture of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump right here. Okay,
yes.
Okay. So again, but if you didn't know, if the key is politics.
Right.
Yeah. Once I give you the key, you understand it. Otherwise, people are assuming it's maybe about American football. All right, and so we have that, and so that is right there. All right, so in other words, we know symbolism. We understand symbolism. And if I read Revelation again, and I remember, assume everything is symbolism, we can maybe read Revelation with new understanding. Better understanding. All right? Okay, it's almost 10, I see. So John uses, he is not coming up with something that never been used before. He heavily borrows from the book of Ezekiel, Daniel, and Zechariah. So he uses the Old Testament a lot. He uses the Exodus from Egypt a lot. All these references are in Revelation. By the way, I do have the rest, okay? I'll give it to you, the second page of our handouts. So you get all the references, okay? The representation of Babylon, okay? The Babylon is the enemy of God. Well, Babylon destroyed Jerusalem in 586. So does it mean that there are no Babylonians ever going to get saved? Now, of course, many Babylonian people from Iraq are getting saved. There are many Iraqi Christians, all right? It's not about that anymore. But Babylon became a symbol of anti-God because they are the ones that destroyed Jerusalem. But that's not to pick on Iraq, okay? Jesus' life and ministry is alluded to. Okay, then we have the ancient mythology, just like the Chronicles of Narnia and so forth, and that is like a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, a woman clothed with the sun, locusts with scorpion tails and human heads. It's like we understand locusts, we understand scorpions, we understand humans, but they are combined in one body. Okay, that is the fantasy. All right? And so I think, and I'll close with this, and that is, I think Revelation was intended to be read out loud so that everybody is blessed. And I think it was like a drama. You picture yourself an amphitheater, okay, that were in every big city in the ancient Greek and Roman world. Every major city would have an amphitheater. Everybody would come to be entertained. And here we have a book of Revelation that is like a dramatic, John uses a dramatic approach to present a message symbolically so that the people can be encouraged, so that people will come into the Christian faith, so that people that are in the Christian faith and are being persecuted, that they are going to endure because they are encouraged in their faith. All right? And so it is like a drama. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near. All right? And so it is just an unfolding of everything that John sees in the Spirit. Okay, he writes all of it down, but at the same time, it's like a fight between good and evil. And it's like different scenes past the scene, like in a theater. Sometimes the curtain closes, and then you have Act 2. The curtains opens again, and you have Act 2, and then maybe there is a repetition, just like in a theater. But the whole point is just to see that the Christians will walk away from this dramatic presentation, and they come away with it saying, wow, Jesus is going to win. Hallelujah. Amen? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this morning, and we thank you for the book of Revelation. What a way of finishing a whole year of going through the Word, going through the Bible. What a way also to finish reading the book with the book of Revelation. And Lord, I pray, Lord, that even tonight or this week we will be encouraged and would want to read Revelation again, as I myself had read it probably more than 50 times. And that we will read it again, Lord, and be encouraged. And so we also pray that you continue to use us powerfully both in church and outside of the church. And we ask you these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Wow.
All right.
Thank you, yeah. Second page.
Oh, yeah. And I got no homework for you guys. Hey!
Thank you.
All right, so the homework is join Ed's group next week. Or whatever other Sunday school it will be in session.
Told us to read Revelations again.
I'm sorry? Yeah, or to read Revelation again. That's right, I did mention it. I want to